Astronauts to the moon.
Ignition sequence start. 3, 2, 1.
Houston, we have a problem.
Liftoff. We have a liftoff. We copy you on the ground. You got a bunch of guys about to turn blue.
What you're seeing here is a mirage.
Let's talk about the field of dreams. Yes, as unfortunate as it might be, space will be faked, as long as space is seen as real. But reality is only real if you do not allow it to be faked. So, let's discuss reality versus what they fake and simply call real. First, let's listen to author William Burroughs. He wrote the book called The New Ocean, the story of the first space age, where he starts off by telling us that science fiction created the space age. The speech is from 1998. Let's listen in.
One of the things that runs through the entire history of the space age and before the space age, and this is one of the leitmotifs that also run through the book, is the direct relation between science and science fiction. You're not at this too long when you don't come to understand that it's the science fiction people, the SF people, as one of my friends calls them, who laid the blueprint for the people who actually built the rockets and planned out the programs. And I did a fair amount of thinking about that throughout the entire process. Konstantin Tsiolkovsky, who was the great Russian rocketeer and the father of rocketry, and who we never heard about during the Cold War for reasons that will not mystify you. Tsiolkovsky and Hermann Oberth, the German, the father of rocketry there, and our own Robert Goddard, all read Jules Verne. They all read From the Earth to the Moon, and they all had, if you'll pardon the expression, had their fires lit by that wonderful voyage. They all read H.G. Wells, The War of the Worlds, and so on. These people were energized and captivated by science fiction. I started the book off, in fact, going back to Daedalus, because I had to come to grips with why exactly do we do this?
Why exactly do we do this? And who is so hell-bent on space travel? I mean, why do these people want off this planet so bad?
There are cynical answers, and they're relevant. One is that corporations in aerospace want to make a lot of money. Another is a lot of generals on both sides wanted to get the high ground for a supposed advantage, whatever that meant, and we're still not sure we know. But beneath that, there were the dreamers, there were the sci-fi people, there were the people who wanted to go for what reason? This is what I had to try to come to grips with, and when I went back to Daedalus, when I went back to Greek mythology, it occurred to me that one of the reasons is transcendence. I came to realize in the course of researching the book that what I was dealing with was not in reality, was not hard-nosed businessmen who were trying to keep their stocks up and generals who were trying to one-up the enemy. What I was dealing with was members of a religion. That's exactly what this undertaking is. Religion. What else to call people, I'm talking about serious engineers who design colonies on Mars and interstellar missions that they know they will never live to see. Religion. What else to call them but members of a religion? As people in the Middle Ages started to build cathedrals, they knew they would never see finished. Religion. And what is the trait that has propelled this all of these years? I remember being at the annual meeting of the American Association for the Advancement of Science, which I go to every year, but several years ago, the magazine Omni was giving out buckets full of free buttons. And the button they were giving out that year said, "The meek shall inherit the earth. The rest of us are going to the stars." And I believe that there are people around everywhere who truly believe that, and they are the ones who fuel, if you'll pardon the expression, who fuel this entire undertaking. In terms of it being a PR ploy by NASA, the answer is yes, and the answer is NASA is unexcelled at doing PR. I don't mean that, however, in a pejorative way. As I explained in Florida, Janet Reno does PR, Ken Starr does PR, the Clinton White House does PR, the Marlboro Man does PR, and Slobodan Milosevic does PR. Why shouldn't the space agency? They've got something to sell, and they're trying to sell it, and they're trying to sell it, and they're trying to sell it. And so is the Planetary Society, Bruce Murray's and the late Carl Sagan Society in Pasadena. These folks are a force. They're out there, and the first thing you do is say, well, it's pipe dreams. On the other hand, as Sandy Kramer, who lives right here in Maryland, who was involved in a lot of the space program for Lockheed, likes to say, the money is spent on Earth. It isn't spent in outer space. And the people who are in these organizations, like the Mars people, like the Planetary Society, are the cutting edge of everybody who comes after them. You can't do any of this stuff unless you dream about it. And they're doing the dreaming.
Science fiction that became scientific fact, science dreamers that became the space travelers. Look no further than the Jules Verne book From the Earth to the Moon, written in 1865, 100 years before NASA would convince the world that they did the same. It came so close to actual events, you'd swear either Jules Verne could see the future or NASA built the mission around the book. You can decide that for yourself, which one seems more likely. Verne predicted the moon landing would be by the Americans. Verne sent 3 humans on a flight around the moon in December, and in 1968, NASA did the same, in December. Verne sent them on a Columbiad, which took off from Tampa, Florida, about 120 miles from where NASA would eventually launch from. Verne wrote of a competition between Florida and Texas to be the launch facility, which happened in real life, and Verne's astronauts were picked up by a U.S. Navy vessel that witnessed the splashdown in the Pacific Ocean. And of course we know the Apollo astronauts were picked up in the Pacific Ocean by the U.S. aircraft carrier Yorktown. The uncanny similarities don't end there, but what is obvious is science fiction became science fact. In 1945, Arthur C. Clarke published his geostationary satellite in Wireless World magazine as a letter to the editor, and it wasn't even considered seriously. However, in less than 15 years, NASA was making science fiction science fact. It was the era of the satellite. Easily one of the most debated topics in this search for truth about where we live is the idea of the satellite. A thought experiment by Newton and a letter to the editor by Clarke, and now over 6 billion people believe in something we don't really even have a need for. So let's go to a 1970 NASA film called Space Down to Earth to learn all about these orbiting works of genius and funny sounds.